Welcome to This Week at CBN. Today we want to answer an email question that came in from Loretta, who says, Ecclesiastes 9:5 says that when we die, we are conscious of nothing and that we are asleep in death. If this is true, how can people claim to see heaven and tell about it on their return? Well, Loretta, let's take a look at Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 4 through 5, and get exactly what it says. But for him who is joined to all the living, there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. What the writer of Ecclesiastes, Solomon, is saying here is that when the dead are gone, they have no more knowledge of what is happening here on earth. They have no reward building up for them in heaven. And it's actually better to be alive on earth knowing you're going to die so that you can continue to work for a reward. When you get into, does it mean that somehow or other they're no longer conscious? Well, let's take a look at what Jesus said about what happens when we die. It's from Mark chapter 12, verses 26 through 27. Concerning the dead, that they rise, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the burning bush passage, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Is he not the God of the dead, but the God of the living? You are therefore greatly mistaken. So here Jesus is saying, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they're alive. They're not dead. God is the God of the living, and when he declares himself the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he's not talking about dead people. He's talking about the living. Now, how can this be? Because we know Abraham died, we know Isaac died, we know Jacob died. Well, let's look at what Paul says. Hear it from 2 Corinthians chapter 5, and keep in mind, Paul was stoned to death, and the disciples came out of the city and prayed over him. And the Bible says he was raised up. Paul also talked about having heavenly visions, going up into the third heaven and seeing things that weren't lawful to talk about. And he had experiences and revelations that were, according to him, in abundance. So he knows what he's talking about here. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, we are confident, yes, well pleased, rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. So Paul is saying that when he was absent from his body, and he's talking about whether in the spirit or not, he is absent from the body, and that meant he was present with the Lord. There was an instantaneous transition that when he was absent, he's now present. So Loretta, let's go back into Ecclesiastes, the book you're quoting, because I think it really shows us what happens when we die. And it's at the very end of it, at chapter 12. Remember your Creator before, and he's talking about that working on your reward. Remember your Creator before the silver cord is loosed, the golden bowl is broken, the pitcher is shattered at the fountain, the wheel broken at the well. Each one of those is an illustration of death. They're all metaphors for death. So he's saying, remember your Creator before you die. Because when you die, the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. And he's echoing back in Genesis, where God formed from clay and breathed into it, and Adam, which is a Hebrew word for red clay, Adam literally means red earth, he breathed into it, and Adam became a living soul. So it's that ensoulment that happens at the breath of God, where his spirit, his soul, become in an earthly vessel that's literally made out of clay. So when that clay dies, what happens to the soul? What happens to the spirit? Well, according to Solomon, it returns to God. And that means our consciousness, our soul, our spirit survive death. And when we die and we're absent from our clay vessel or absent from the body, that we're present with the Lord. Well, I hope that answers your question. And if you've got questions for us for This Week at CBN, all you have to do is email us and put it into the Bring It On box. It's available on CBN.com. Well, that's it for This Week at CBN.